DJ Nation fam, happy Friday night. Let's get after it. We're talking the week 10 main slate with the DJ Nation pod. You know how we do. It's powered by the Fantasy Authority, and we're ready to give you this fantasy DFS goodness to talk about as we prepare for Sunday. And it's already week 10. It's unbelievable.
Nuts.
We're at the home stretch, boys. We're at the home. Or I shouldn't even say home stretch. It takes out of the equation, but 2 months of the regular season basically left. And, it feels like we've been doing this so long, but it also feels like we just started. It's crazy. It's crazy. I already see you shaking your head over there, Maddie. What's up, boys? It's DJ Nation podcast. I got Maddie D with me. I got Kevin Steele with me. You can follow those guys on X and Twitter at Maddie DFS, at FantasyRat13. And I'm Ryan Williams at Ryan Alexander _W. Guys, we got an ugly one to get into this week. It's probably the ugliest slate that we've talked about. Just as far as when you look at it, it is a 10 gamer, which we always love. We love talking about, the 10 games. You kind of can, carve out that path easily without so many teams to choose from as we had last week. London game on the slate. It kind of helps things out, obviously, with the bye still going on too. But, when we look at the slate as a whole, we're not seeing a lot of game totals over 50 as we saw last week. Granted, there's less games to choose from, but we're just in kind of a weird abyss as far as it goes to talent on the slate. We already had the Ravens and Bengals play. We're not going to get, explosive offenses like, the Texans haven't been explosive this year, but Texans aren't on this slate. A lot of other strong teams aren't on the slate. And when we're looking at matchups and also value, it is devoid as far as this week. And we're talking here on a Friday. So usually we have a couple things shape up at this point. Obviously things can change over the weekend and we'll want to monitor that. But at the top right now, boys, it's not looking great. And I'm excited to get into the slate with you guys. It's the DJ Nation podcast, guys. Appreciate you guys rocking along with us live or whether you're listening back. We always appreciate that. Make sure you guys are hitting up the channel, hitting up the description. You can follow along, get in that Discord channel with the link there in the description. We appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, give us a rating and review, or you could be like Dame Dallas and just call us out live on the podcast for playing ass guys like Dak Prescott. Appreciate it if you're rocking along, Dame. We'll chalk up that L for you live. That's what we do here. We take the L's on our chins. We don't hide away from them. Unlike some other people. But boys, how are we feeling about this week, and what are we going to be doing with the state of the slate come Sunday? Maddie, you've been shaking your head. How you feeling, boss?
Well, first, I can't believe it's week 10 already. Blink and we're already here. Best ball, regular season's winding down. We're about to head into the playoffs for that. But yeah, it's nuts. I feel like though we've been kind of spoiled because we haven't really had many ugly slates this year. This is really probably the first true ugly slate, where it's not anything stands out as, man, I love that game. I think there's two games that jump out to me that have maybe a potential of a back and forth. For me, that's Tampa Bay, San Francisco, and Arizona and the Jets. But I mean, even then, like Arizona and the Jets, Arizona's been kind of playing, some lower scoring games and some, back and forth running the ball with Connor. And then on the other game, I mean, we get McCaffrey back in the fold for the 49ers, and Purdy's going to be chalk despite being in a really good spot. And the 49ers defense has been a little giving, but, can Ken Baker continue to, do what he's been doing without, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin against that San Francisco defense? I guess the good thing is it's at Tampa and it's not in San Fran for him. So those are really, those are the two games that stand out as a chance to go back and forth. Other than that, it's just a lot of one-sided affairs. I mean, you got Philly, who's going to obliterate Dallas. Dallas is awful. You've got the Buffalo, who should handle the Colts. I mean, I guess we could see Joe Flacco, maybe keep that game a little close. I just don't see how the Indy defense stops Josh Allen, at all. And then you've got Minnesota going up against Jacksonville, which Jacksonville's been a historically bad defense as well. I guess the one game I didn't talk about, which I'll be curious to get you guys' thoughts on, but I mean, Atlanta and New Orleans. New Orleans got a ton of injuries on their offensive side of the ball. Atlanta's got Drake London questionable, but he should play. He just bruised his hip when he caught that touchdown last week. I guess that's another one that maybe possibly could have a little bit of back and forth to it. The issue there is on the Atlanta side. If Drake London were to miss, it would be pretty obvious as to who crushes. But I mean, Mooney, London, Bijan, Pitts, they're all priced up, and so you kind of have to choose, who you think is going to crush there, and that's not really a game I want to play. So yeah, it's a gross slate. I don't really know where I'm going at quarterback. I mean, Purdy stands out as the first guy that I tend to lean towards. I mean, 6,500 in that matchup with Tampa Bay, which has been really, really giving over the last 4 or 5 weeks or so. They gave up 291-3 to Mahomes, 276-4 to Cousins, 281-5 to Lamar. Even Rattler had 243-1. I'm pretty sure that was his first career start. And then back when they played Atlanta a handful of weeks ago in the first matchup, that was the game Cousins threw for 509-4. So the Tampa Bay pass defense has been essentially non-existent over the last few weeks. So I really do like Purdy. He's going to be popular. Debo's got a Q tag. So if Debo were to miss that, the pass catchers get a lot more concentrated. You just play Kittle and you probably play Jawan Jennings. But if Debo plays, you play Debo. So that game's interesting. I like going back to the well on Josh Allen as well. Up at the top at 7,700. I know we were all over him last week against Miami, and he actually had a 20-something yard rush that was called back by a bogus holding call, a rushing touchdown, and they ended up kicking a field goal right before halftime. So he could have had another 10 points there. He also threw a pick that wasn't his fault. It bounced off Keon Coleman's hands inside the 5-yard line. So could have had another passing touchdown. He still scored 23 points. And so that could have been, it legit could have been a 36-point game out of Josh Allen. So I like going back to the well against him and that game there against Indy in the Dome. So I know I kind of jumped right in and stole a little bit of your thunder there, Ryan, but
no,
it's kind of gross here at quarterback, and it's Purdy and it's Josh Allen and it's Jalen Hurts for me.
Yeah, no stealing of the thunder at all, Maddie. I mean, this is what we do. We talk shop, and yeah, I mean, I like where your head's at. I mean, for me, it basically comes down to who are the guys that could put up 30 points this week of upside. And I won't, and I'll just take that for what it is. And, I understand, we were kind of talking and I'm excited to hear what Kev's thoughts are, because, we all know that the Fantasy Rat 13 is always going to be thinking outside the box on ways that he can build his lineups and get to unique builds that not people are on. So I'm excited to hear where he's at. But, I think the two most popular quarterbacks, at least from what I was garnering coming into this pod with you guys, is Herbert and potentially Rodgers. It kind of feels a little bit thin, and I think we'll have some things open up that get people off of that, but he's 5,800 this week, and so it makes sense. You kind of know who to pair him with. They moved on from Mike Williams. There's no Allen Lazard, but the stack is just so expensive that it kind of feels thin. It's a good running matchup for them. Maybe Breece Hall gets going, so that kind of has me off Aaron Rodgers. The Herbert one is interesting, and I know Kev will dive into that a little bit, but it still kind of feels thin for me. I mean, this is a Chargers offense that we kind of know what they want to do, even if the volume's been up a little bit from a passing output standpoint. And J.K. Dobbins pretty much is unplayable for me at 7,200 with what his role is. So, I think, a lot of things, if you're looking at projection models and things like that, I think Herbert will pop because it's a very easy stack him with. But I actually like a wide receiver of his, probably the most on his slate. Again, we don't have much value as it is right now, so we're definitely going to have to hunt a little bit to find that value. But I think that we can, and that's because I want to. Josh Allen and Purdy are two locks for me. I mean, I play 3 max. You guys know that, and those will be the two guys that I build around on 2 teams for sure. If value does open up, I would love a way to get to Jalen Hurts because I'm going to be playing Saquon Barkley. I'm going to try and get to him where I can. It's just an absolutely incredible matchup. And, it's kind of what we talk about all the time. Like, I love just being able to get all the points. And, Hurts and Saquon have the ability to both pop off in matchups similar to Lamar and Derrick Henry that we've seen this year. And so especially against the Dallas Cowboys, like it's not even a situation for me where I look at like, oh, well, if they are up 30, like do these guys come out or whatever? Like I'm not even going to play that game. It's like if the Eagles are smashing, I know where it's coming from. So I'm not even going to play that game because those guys are just amazing. Josh Allen, Randy, just to highlight that before I toss it to Kev, we're already going to be out with Keon Coleman. And then Amari Cooper has been on the injury report. Now he's kind of on the positive side of questionable. It sounds like we could be getting him suited up, but if he were to miss, like Josh Allen becomes such a great play because he's so going to be so easy to stack him with. You play him with Shakir and potentially Kincaid, or just one of the guys, and then it just opens up the paths so easily for him to be able to get there. So I love that, because the biggest thing is like guesswork with Allen, and we probably are looking at those guys, maybe Matt Collins. So it could be an interesting stack that's very easily to pair with. Kev, how are you looking at quarterback this week, and what's standing out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think well, I think the way that I am going to build on this slate is going to be 3 running backs, and there's no running back that I want to play that's sub 5K, or excuse me, sub 6K. So for me, like, I think when you look at this, so if I'm going to do that, like, it's going to be really hard to justify paying up for these top dollar quarterbacks. And to be honest, like, I can poke holes in all of them because, Jalen Hurts, while he can definitely be a great play, I don't see a lot of volume coming his way this week. Like, but he hasn't necessarily needed volume either, because like the last couple of weeks, if you look, I mean, really the last 4 games, 25, 14, 20, and 24 pass attempts, and he still scored 29, 35, 22, and 21. But like if he scores 22, like then he's probably not optimal, because he's $7,800. And unless you think Dallas can push them, unless you think Cooper Rush can have a decent game, which I don't see that happening, because Philadelphia's defense has turned into be one of the top defenses in the league. Their secondary has become phenomenal, and they actually were a slot funnel where you could attack them into the slot, which would be good for CeeDee Lamb. But they put Cooper DeJean there, and he has been just lights out as a rookie. He has been a lockdown cover corner. And so, like, I don't see any path. They can't run the ball. And so, like, I don't see a path for the Cowboys doing anything. So I feel like a lot of this is going to be Saquon, which is why I really like playing Saquon, even at his price, right? And so, like, okay, that you take him away. Josh Allen can definitely get there, but, like, are you wanting to stack him? Like, I think that game actually has some sneaky upside potential to it, because it is possible that the Colts could, maybe get there and at least keep the game close for this one. So maybe him, but then you have like Kirk Cousins, but then New Orleans has no weapons at all. Chris Olave's out, Rashid Shaheed's out. I mean, this is basically Derek Carr with Alvin Kamara and just a bunch of checkdowns. I don't know about that. Mahomes, against Denver, you can make an argument there. Purdy, what worries me the most about that is the fact that Christian McCaffrey's back. Like that changes a lot of the dynamic with what they could do with him. And depending on what they do with Christian McCaffrey, I expect Christian McCaffrey to play a normal workload. That's the way I'm going to use or to view him this week. I know there's going to be a lot of hesitancy with him because this is his first game back. Did they really give him the same workload? I expect that he's going to see that kind of a workload, but it's possible that, Christian McCaffrey rushes a couple in, takes away the upside of Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy offers nothing on the ground. And can Baker Mayfield do it again without any single offense? I know they did it last week a little bit against the Chiefs, kind of got there, scored 18 DK points, but like, so that worries me a little bit there. So like, you just keep going down. You're like, man, do I really want to pay for these top dollar quarterbacks? And same thing with Sam Darnold, like Jacksonville's. We're talking about starting Mac Jones. If they can't keep it close, so like, do any of these guys like while the upside's there, what are the chances of them hitting it? So maybe we should look to pay down a little bit this week at quarterback and get in these high price running backs that we want to play. And I think that might be the most optimal. And then you say, okay, well, who are those quarterbacks? I think it's Russell Wilson at 5,900. I mean, it's not a hard stack to get to. It's pretty simple that, we know you want to pair him with George Pickens. And if you really look, so in this matchup, on paper, there's a lot of people talk about this Commanders defense and how well they played, but they haven't played anybody. Like the best offenses they played, they've all gotten there. The Bengals put up 33. The Ravens put up 30. And then there was one more. The Bucks in week 1 put up 37. But then past that, they played the Panthers, the Giants, the Cardinals, which is I don't know if I would call them a great offense or not, but they put up 14. But they got the Giants twice, the Browns with Deshaun Watson. Like, they haven't played any really great offenses. And so, not saying that the Steelers offense is elite, but Russell Wilson, the last 2 games, has actually looked really good. He's averaging 271 passing yards over his first 2 games with the Steelers. And so, like, I think this game actually has that kind of potential. And then, it's kind of nervous. Well, man, I don't know about, can the Commanders do anything? Because the Pittsburgh's defense has been really good. But over the last 6 weeks, I mean, the Steelers have allowed 271 passing yards per game, which is the 6th highest rate in the league right now. Where they've been okay is they haven't really allowed a ton of passing touchdowns. They've only allowed 6, but still, like, that is higher than I was expecting to see for the Steelers. And so we've kind of seen some teams be able to keep up. So, like, maybe this is the game that's kind of the sneaky shootout that nobody's talking about, that nobody's going to have any ownership of. And it's not a really expensive stack to get to here in this one. And actually, I think a lot of people are going to want to play Terry McLaurin if you were going to. But I think Joey Porter might shadow coverage him, which was not a match for love. But actually, Noah Brown has been getting there the last couple of weeks. So it's a run back option. So Brian Robinson's out. So actually, this could be another good, decent game for Austin Eckler as a pass catching back here. So I look at this game and I think, well, is this the game that could actually kind of be that sneaky shootout potential here within this game to be able to get there with? And so I do like Russell Wilson at $5,900. I think this matchup is underrated. Nobody's going to want to play this one. And then, Justin Herbert's tough for me because while I'll say Justin Herbert has, especially recently, started to throw the ball a lot more than what he has. I think over the last 4 games, he's like second in dropbacks. And they've even done it in times that you would have expected them to be much more run heavy. So they've been okay with actually opening it up and throwing the ball a little bit. But at the same time, they're playing Tennessee, and Will Levis is starting, and Will Levis has been absolutely dreadful. Like, that game could be over by halftime. And so, like, it feels kind of thin at $5,200, but it wouldn't surprise me if he got there. But then also, like, we've kind of talked about this pre-show, but, like, Mac Jones is $4,400. Like, I know Mac Jones isn't great. But I don't know, like, what level does he have to hit to be able to get there? He opens up a lot. Jacksonville does still have Evan Ingram and Brian Thomas there. Minnesota's pass defense at times hasn't been great. It's actually, I mean, if you can get to the quarterback, which, don't get me wrong, the Jaguars have 0 offensive line, and so I think they're going to have a field day. But still, like, negative game script, you have to throw the ball a lot. 4,400. He has had games where he's thrown for 300 yards, a couple scores in his career. This is obviously a new landing spot here out of New England where he had no weapons, but, like, I don't know, that might be a little bit too thin, but, like, I really love Russell Wilson this week. And the other game, which you kind of hit on already, was the Jets and Cardinals. Like, that could be the other game that has that potential. Only thing that worries me, though, is the Cardinals side, and the Cardinals passing offense has just been kind of a mess this year. There's been a few instances where Kyler Murray's been able to find Marvin Harrison deep, but it's just been a mess because Drew Petzing is an idiot. But they keep winning games, so, like, we're not really going to talk about it that much because they keep figuring out a way to win. But it's just their passing offense is just what worries me a little bit there. But I do think there's some potential there with that game as well.
Yeah, that game is interesting. I mean, we saw the Cardinals defense be one that you could potentially attack, and then you see the Bears come in there, they fall flat on their ass in Arizona. And, like, even with all the firepower that the Jets have, like, this is an offense that kind of, was still trying to find its identity, like, hasn't smashed by any means. And honestly, like, outside of Garrett Wilson, like, the guys don't deserve the price tags that they necessarily have. I mean, Rodgers is 5,800. I get that, but, like, Breece Hall has been let down a little bit. Like, Devontae Adams had to get there, like, late. And the game kind of environment kind of presented itself like that for them in Houston. This Arizona game, could there's definitely a range there. I could see it, popping off, but the pieces are just so expensive that, like, I could definitely see this being, a letdown, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, we want to find the explosive environments and I feel like go all in on them, because I really think that, like, trying to find guys who can put up 25 points or 30 points, like trying to chase those raw points is going to be key. And, like, we don't have a lot of them, like, on this slate, especially when we start to break down, like, what running back and wide receiver, look at the top guys. Last week it was fun to get value because we knew there were so many guys in elite spots that we wanted to be able to pay up for. And, like, even this week, like if I had all the salary in the world to get to a guy like Justin Jefferson, I'm not even sure that I would necessarily be all that excited to be playing him. Yeah, it's a matchup against Jacksonville and they could roll, but like he's not seeing the type of usage that we would want to see out of a wide receiver one to be able to get him the ball, especially with Hawkinson being back now. Like they've been spreading it around. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is like out of the equation for me with Cooper Rush. And like, I get it, Kev. Like if I'm looking, I do like what you're saying of playing 3 running backs, because I think the running backs, like especially high end, are just so elite this week. Great that like if I can get a cheaper quarterback to pay up for 2 of these guys, especially like we mentioned Christian McCaffrey, who's just should be a talking point in and of its own. But yeah, that would be the way that I'd want to play it. Is get as many of these elite production running backs as we could to be able to load up on lineups. Speaking of the Minnesota situation, like we do have we got to talk about Sam Darnold here, because he has been primed to be somewhat explosive this year. Obviously, we know he's got explosive pieces around him. He's going against the Jacksonville team that is terrible. He comes in at 6,200. Like, can this be a week where he can go out and put up a number that we would like? He hasn't really put up a 25-point score, a couple 22s, 23s. But again, like it's just such a there's so many ways that this Minnesota team can take advantage of a Jacksonville team that's devoid of talent, that it makes it feel like it's tough to get there. But we know the pieces are there for Minnesota, so I wanted to just bring him up.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it. Like, it's just that he hasn't really shown the ability to see it. Because if he scores 22, it's probably not enough on this slate. I mean, I would think, maybe it is a week that's really low scoring, and maybe that is just what you need. The matchup is certainly there. I mean, it is a phenomenal matchup for the Vikings, because, I mean, to be honest, the Jaguars defense has just been absolutely dreadful. I mean, they've been pretty much whatever way you want to beat them, whether it's through the air, whether it's on the ground. The ground is obviously they've been much better against running backs, but either way, like they've been much more of a pass funnel this year. But still, it just worries you with, can Mac Jones do it? Can they keep this game close, or do they just fall behind really quickly and then they just kind of cruise from there? And Sam Darnold doesn't really need to open up, because to get like that elite like 30-point upside ceiling, you need that game environment where they are pushed, right? And it's the same thing with the wide receivers. Like that's where it worries you with the wide receivers like Justin Jefferson, because this is an absolute smash spot for Justin Jefferson, because the Jaguars play the highest rate of man coverage in the league, which I don't know why, because they're terrible at it. They get absolutely abused. They give up the most fantasy points to outside wide receivers this year. And against man coverage, Justin Jefferson leads all wide receivers in yards per route run. He's got like a 5-something yards per route run against man coverage. And so, like, this is a phenomenal spot for him. But like much like we saw last night with the Bengals, right, where Jamar Chase got there, but it was a back and forth game. They were pushing the ball, and that's what you need, the environment you need for a wide receiver just to absolutely smash. And I don't know if the Jaguars can do it. I mean, Mac Jones is obviously better than a lot of backup quarterbacks you're going to see. They're going to come in and play, but he's still there's still a lot of questions there, and their offensive line is still really horrendous. And so it just worries me a little bit. So I definitely think, having depending on how many lineups you're going to play, having some exposure to Sam Darnold, I don't think is a bad idea, but I just don't know if it has that kind of ceiling.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I just, wanted to bring him up because of the explosive pieces that are around him. The only other guy that I felt like I wanted to talk about with you guys, and I'm happy you brought up Russell Wilson, Kev, because I think that game is a little interesting with Washington and Pittsburgh, and Jaden Daniels, coming in. I think he's kind of been forgotten about because, they really haven't needed to do that much. He's had the injury and they've kind of played some weird matchups. But, this game against Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh defense has not really played against elite quarterbacks at all this year. They played Kirk Cousins week 1. He's still dealing with the, Achilles injury. They've played, the likes of Aaron Rodgers, Dust, and, Anthony Richardson, whoever the Raiders were putting out there. Like, they've had some really favorable matchups from a quarterback standpoint, and they're getting ready to get into a gauntlet. They got a record there that kind of says, that they're, elite, so to speak. And we know they got pieces on defense, but Jaden Daniels, does a lot of great things that could make it rough on this defense, being able to run and to be able to hit guys deep. And he could be forgotten about. So, like, he's a guy that I want to keep in mind. That's interesting. I think that Brian Robinson's still on the injury report, if I'm not mistaken. And this could be a game. He's going to be out, Kev, you said? Yeah, so like this could be a game that, has some sneaky upside and shootout potential, because we know that Russell Wilson can try and, sling that thing when need be. But Jaden Daniels, I think, will start to get in the mix, I feel like, and he has the ability to kind of surrounded by other people that people might be apt to get to. So I'm interested in getting to him as well.
Steelers are on the road too.
Yeah, so
defense typically doesn't play as good on the road.
Right, and like, the one thing that they pride themselves on is being able to get pressure, and like if he's a little bit healthier and can be able to run, like just stacking up points that way, could be intriguing. But yeah, I just thinking on the other side that Kev called out there with Russell Wilson, I did want to bring up Jaden Daniels because I feel like he'll go overlooked. Let's talk about the running back position, boys. And this one is definitely a conundrum for me this week because of the elite talent that we have at the top and just how great of matchups there are for them and what sticks out on the page. Your top three running backs who are 8K are Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, and Christian McCaffrey. And, Kev, I heard your point on Christian McCaffrey about getting those touchdowns. But when you look at last year, with Brock Purdy and the good games that he have, like he can get there when Christian McCaffrey gets there. So I'm almost apt to say, like, if I'm playing Purdy, I'll just, take McCaffrey along for the ride, especially if Debo's out. Like, I mean, that just is a foregone conclusion that, you want to get exposure to as many pieces as you can of elite upside with those guys in San Fran who are projected to put up the most points this week. And like, we know his ability to be able to catch passes out of the backfield. And this could just be like, he's been out for so long, but he's been getting healthy, and it's just a full go with him when he's out there. It's obviously like a GPP play. Like there's ways where that could definitely go wrong, and we'll see. It's, Kyle Shanahan has been one to pull out the rug from us time and time again. But, if he's going to be healthy, he's out there. Plus, it's in the first slot, which usually we don't get with San Fran. They're usually playing in that 325 window, but it'll be in the new window. So we'll have a lot of stuff to unpack there for the San Fran 49ers early. But Alvin Kamara and Saquon Barkley, like, I mean, these two guys are just in elite spots there. I feel like we talk about Alvin Kamara every week, and he's been getting there, on the production because of, their wide receiver situation just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And so he's been getting there on pass catches without having to get a touchdown. And once those touchdowns, start rolling, it could, he could just be able to break the slate. So he's definitely obviously going to be, I feel like, popular at 8,100. But then that also means that, like, people are going to forget about Saquon, I feel like, who's only $200 more than Alvin Kamara this week. They've priced up Kamara, a lot. So a couple $100 more, which that difference just doesn't feel right, especially with the ownership difference I expect that we'll see. And Saquon is Saquon. So, trying to get both into lineups, I guess, might be the move for me this week if I can make it work. When we're talking about the rest of the running back slate, like it doesn't really, there's not a lot that stands out to me. Aaron Jones at 6,700. I feel like I'm going to be, looking at him. DeAndre Swift at 6,500. There's one thing that, the Bears do at home, and that's their put up points. Like they're averaging, I believe, like just over 28 points at home and can't even get 20 on the road. And DeAndre Swift in recent weeks has been a big part of that. I feel like they haven't been able to establish the ground game. Perfect time to be able to do that against this New England team, who they're expected to be able to beat handedly. So he's definitely back in the mix for me. And then I guess, the Washington running back situation will definitely be in play for me without Brian Robinson out there. Austin Eckler, he was able to get into the mix, got just over 20 points, or not even 17.3 DK points, but at the price tag, you were able to feel good about that when he got popular late on Sunday morning last week. It is frustrating they're still using Jeremy McNichols though to spell him a little bit to help his upside, but like there's not a lot of value at the running back position, which makes me want to get to elite guys. Kev, I know you talked about not looking past 6K for your running backs mostly this week, but Maddie, what stands out to you at running back this week?
Yeah, you hit on most of the guys that I'm interested in, and I'm with Kev that I'm not playing anybody below 6K. I don't think you need to. I mean, it's pretty straightforward at running back for me. I mean, Breece Hall, he's going to get over 21 opportunities every single game. In one of the projected to be one of the higher score games of the week at Arizona. I like Breece Hall a lot. Kamara, I don't know how you don't play Kamara. I mean, he had 38 opportunities last week. I mean, it's just absurd. I don't know the last time I've seen a number that high in terms of running back opportunities. I mean, 29 carries and 9 targets is just stupid. And their receivers this week are Mason Tipton, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and a bunch of other no-name guys. So, like, it's literally going to be Kamara and Taysom Hill and, just a bunch of guys that typically don't play receiver in the NFL outside of MVS, who's notorious for just running wind sprints down the field. But I just don't see how Kamara doesn't get 10 targets again. So 8,100, I'm totally cool with that. The Atlanta defense is not very good. So I do think the Saints should be able to, score a little bit. But I mean, Kamara scored 30 points last week without scoring a touchdown. So it's just like, he's so safe in this role. He falls into 2 touchdowns there. He scores 42. So I don't know how you don't click him. So Kamara is probably, if I was ignoring price, Kamara would probably be my top overall play. I love the Aaron Jones call. The Jags have been eviscerated on the ground the last 4 weeks. They just got smashed last week by Saquon. They gave up 237 yards rushing to the Eagles. 2 weeks ago, they gave up 170 yards rushing to Green Bay. And 4 weeks ago, they gave up 152 to the Bears. So it's definitely a good spot for Aaron Jones. And if we think the Vikings control this game, which they should, the Vikings have not shied away from giving Aaron Jones a full workload. I mean, he's got 21, 19, 22, 19 carries in games this year so far. And we know he's got pass game involvement. So I like Aaron Jones a lot. He's a big play every time he has a chance to make a big play every time he touches the ball. And he's their red zone back as well. So great usage for Jones, great matchup, good price at 6,700. So I do like Aaron Jones. I love the Saquon Barkley call as well. I don't know that I'll get to him at 8.3. I think I prefer Kamara if I was choosing between the two. That's not to say I don't like Saquon. Dallas run defense has not been good. Their defense in general has not been good. So I do like Saquon this week. And then the other side of that New Orleans game, Bijan Robinson is up there in terms of safest workloads, this year. He's consistently in that 15 to 20 carry range, and he's also getting 5 to 7 targets a game. So he's another guy that is just as safe as it gets and is uber talented. So those are the guys that I'm honed in on. I'm probably not playing McCaffrey. I just don't trust it. He's priced up at 8K. First game back, he didn't, no off season really, no training. He's not in shape. I mean, it's one thing, right? If it's like a arm injury and he's been out and he's been able to, actually be doing some physical, running and things that his position require. But, with it being Achilles and leg issues, I just don't trust the conditioning. I don't trust the shape that he's in. I think he's going to be eased back in. They haven't made it any point to rush him back. And so I think it's going to be just a split in carries where neither running back is really going to be useful for fantasy in terms of DFS. I think you could even argue playing Jordan Mason in season long, but I guess that's just how confident or how I view that workload is going to be split. I just don't see McCaffrey coming out and getting 25 touches week 1 of him being back. I could be totally wrong. Even if he does get 25 touches, doesn't mean he's going to crush. So he could lose some, efficiency
Does he need
and
25
burst.
touches though? Do you think?
Yes, I would say yes, because I think he's going to be lacking his normal burst and efficiency.
He has practiced the last 2 weeks, so I mean, it's not like he's just
but that's still not the same. And I don't trust it.
I just feel like though, like he's typically a running back that's like 10K, 10.5. I mean, we were paying 10K for him last year, and he's 8K, and so like, and maybe he's not as involved on the ground, which he doesn't need to be, because like I only care about his pass catching usage, and that's really what they've been missing. They don't use Jordan Mason in that way. Like I think it's entirely possible he sees 7 or 8 targets in this game, and maybe he only does get 12 to 15 carries, but that's all he needs.
See, at 8K, when you've got Breece Hall that's cheaper, you've got all these other running backs that we talk. I mean, Saquon, Kamara. I would just rather play those guys because I know that they can. I know the shape they're in. I know that they can smash. They're all in good matchups too. It's not like they're in bad matchups. I just don't think it's a slate for it.
I think if it's owner, I'm gonna want to see what his ownership is on Sunday. If it's not high, if it's low, I'm gonna have Chris McCaffrey. But like just because he's 8K, like he can easily smash this slate. But
even if he gets you 25 at 8K, that's still not good enough.
Right. Well,
I mean, it's fine. Don't get me wrong.
Relative
8K,
to what
25 at 8K is fine.
But
yeah.
Like I said, it's definitely a thin play. Like it depends on how many lineups you're playing. Like I don't think like if I was just playing one lineup, would I play Christian McCaffrey in it? Probably not. But like I definitely think that there's some upside here.
Yeah. I mean I actually agree with both of you guys, which is rare. But yeah, I think Maddie, I do think there's a world where he can get there on limited work just because of how explosive he is. And when we're talking about a slate as ugly as this one is, 25 points might be enough. I think the interesting thing is like Purdy, I expect will project well and be so popular that like there will be a lot of teams that play Purdy but don't play McCaffrey. And I could argue that that's kind of like a wrong case because like if Purdy's popping off and like McCaffrey's going to be a direct, correlator of that potentially, or like they're just projected to score 30 points. So like playing both of them, you're just, you're banking on the points. And we know that they have the propensity to throw him the ball like with the inside the 20. Like he could have a workload where it's like, okay, like we're not going to use you between the 20s, but once we get in the red zone, like let's go out there and like get you some work or whatever. Like it's just so interesting. It is a frustrating situation to kind of dive into, and that's why like I don't want to play McCaffrey without Purdy, which is like it kind of seems like a little bit weird in that sense. But like I don't want to have a lineup that's just banking on all the points from San Fran are coming through McCaffrey only. Like on the Purdy team, it's like okay, if I'm playing Purdy, then let's just take guys who can get there with him. Especially if there's no, Deebo Samuel, I think will unlock that a little bit more as well too. But yeah, definitely fun decision points to make because right there is Saquon and Kamara as well too. So just gonna be fun. What else we got at running back, boys? Anything? It's pretty straightforward this week, but I want to make sure we're crossing them off. Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's definitely some other running backs that haven't been mentioned that definitely should be mentioned. I continue to say it, and I'm going to say it again. DeAndre Swift continues to be. I mean, even I know last week wasn't great for him. He did find the end zone, but he still managed, to put up 14 DK points on 22 touches, and the 22 touches is kind of the key part because he's seeing so many touches right now, and he's averaging over 18 DK points a game, and which is the 6th highest rate in the league. One of the big reasons for his, for this upside is because he's seeing 71% of the opportunities in his backfield, and there's not a lot of running backs that are able to get there at that, or they're seeing that type of workload, and he's significantly cheaper. He's only $6,500. He should be higher than that. But the workload he's seeing right now, he should be $7,500, but he's not. And so, he's basically seeing around 16 carries and 4 targets per game. That's right around, what you would expect from like your, typical RB1 type of upside. And honestly, the Patriots run defense has been one to exploit as of late. They've allowed 160 rushing yards and nearly 2 full touchdowns per game to running back. So, I definitely think that he is in play this week at his price of $6,500. He definitely should be, in your player pool. I think Ramondre Stevenson on the other side of that game is another player you can talk about. Now, I will say this: he has been driven completely touchdown by touchdowns, because in games that he hasn't scored a touchdown, he's averaging 4.3 fantasy points per game. So, like, that's brutally bad. But he still is seeing a big workload: 14 carries, 3.5 targets per game. And, like I said, over the last 2 games, he's kind of bounced back in a pretty big way, but he's also scored 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games. But the Bears' run defense has really started to struggle over the last 4 games. They've allowed 140 rushing yards, 80 touchdown per game. They've also allowed the 7th they rank 7th in explosive run rate allowed, 5th lowest stuff rate, and their 2.72 yards before contact is the highest over the last 4 games among any defense. So Ramondre Stevenson, I definitely think you could look there. I think James Conner is 100% in play. And honestly, we had played a lot of James Conner last week. We talked about him with somebody we really got onto, and he should have had a monster day, but he lost he lost 1 touchdown on an end around to Trey McBride. And then, there he got us all the way down to the goal line, and then he got dropped on his head and had to come out to get checked for concussion. And then Trey Benson came in and stole a touchdown from him. And then Amari DiMercado came in, ripped off a long touchdown later in that game. But he still was able to finish the 120 total yards and 21 total touches. So, and then the Jets defense has allowed the 10th most rushing yards, and they are tied with the Saints with 7 rushing touchdowns allowed over the last 4 games. And so I think, all things considered, I think he's a really strong play at his price tag at $6,500. I think a lot of people aren't going to want to get there. So I think he's in play. It's hard not to kind of like Kareem Hunt, though he is getting more expensive, but at $6,600, he's not involved in the passing game, which kind of sucks, because that's kind of what I would like to see, especially on a site like DraftKings. But he's still seeing this monster workload right now. Well, last week he had another 27 carries. And the Broncos defense isn't one that's super scary. They've allowed the 13th fewest rushing yards, but really have struggled is they have allowed the 5th most receiving yards, 9th most receiving yards, and the 4th most touchdowns. But when I look at this defense, like, they're also a defense that we were kind of heralding as like one of the better defenses in the league, but also make a really strong case that they hadn't played anybody. So, you know what I mean? And so, like, we saw them last week get absolutely destroyed by the Ravens, allow 41 points in that game. I don't necessarily love it just because, like I said, he's not being involved in the passing game, but I wouldn't shock if he scored a couple touchdowns. J.K. Dobbins against the Titans, what should be a really positive game script, one where he's another player that's seeing a 70% opportunity share. He's also seeing an 11% target share, which is solid. He's basically the engine of this backfield right now. And if you look at the Titans, have allowed a 4.65 yard per carry, which ranks 13th, and only 2 touchdowns per game on the ground. I think if you dig a little bit deeper, you look at the Titans, they rank 10th in explosive run rate allowed. They're also 12th in yards before contact per attempt over the last 4. They've also allowed the 19th most fantasy points for running backs, but they have allowed the most receiving touchdowns to running backs so far this year. So I definitely think they're starting to see a little bit of a crack within this run defense. On the season, they've done much better, but as of recent, they've really started to struggle. J.K. Dobbins, at his price isn't bad. So I definitely think you could look there as another option. So, I think so. Those are a couple different running backs. Like I said, with Brian Robinson ruled out, I don't hate Austin Eckler. Even last week, like, he was a little bit optimal just because of his price tag. He was only 5,300. Still scored 17 last week. He was able to find the end zone. It is frustrating because he's not seeing like a huge work, which I don't expect them to. They're not going to all of a sudden give him 20 carries or 20 touches or anything like that. He is 30 years old. I don't see that happening. They were comfortable with splitting it between Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols last week. But, at his price tag, if they fall behind and they need to throw the ball, like, he definitely could be on the field more because they were in a pretty decent game script for themselves last week. But I definitely agree with that. I think if I'm paying up, though, I didn't really talk about, but Saquon Barkley is my number one guy. I'm going to try to have him on every single lineup. This is just the nut matchup. The Cowboys' run defense has just been fucking terrible. Like, it's awful. This team is terrible. And I think, we saw him last week in a game script kind of similar, but this one's even better. He still put up 36.9. He is one of the few guys that like have that true ceiling on this slate. You're going to pay that price. Like, he needs to be able to get you 30 plus fantasy points. And he's one of the few guys that could get there. I know Alvin Kamara had that monster performance and he saw those carries, but I don't know if that's the type of game script you can expect. They're also playing the Panthers a little bit different. I think they were leading for some of that as well. And so, like, that kind of worries you a little bit. But I totally get it, though, because he hasn't seen less than 8 targets in a game since week 3. Like, this dude is just being absolutely peppered. So he's like a wide receiver 1 right now. And so, like, it's kind of crazy. It's on one hand, I don't mind it, but on the other hand, Taysom Hill's there. He could definitely still specials. I know he didn't need the touchdowns last week, but it feels a little bit more thin, where the Falcons have actually been decent against the run this year. Like, this isn't like they're not. That's the one thing they're actually better at this year. But still, and then Bijan at 7,700. But I worry about ceiling there. Like, if you're paying that kind of price tag for a running back, I want him to be able to score that. Now, he's been consistent the last 4 games, scoring at least 21 or more DK points. But, like, I want him to be able to have that upside of where he scores 30. And he just doesn't typically see those type of attempts. And it's a little bit more on a game script where the game's a little bit closer. But still, he's still in play. He's still going to be my player pool, but it's a little bit more thin. And then Breece Hall, I definitely think is going to continue to be in play because he's Breece Hall. But if I had to choose between these top running backs, it's going to be Saquon Barkley for me, and then probably Bijan Robinson, the 2 ones I like the most, followed by Christian McCaffrey. There's a little bit more uncertainty with Christian McCaffrey. I'm not on the side that I'm necessarily worried about what his workload will be. I don't want to go into the slate doing that, and then after the slate be like, oh, shit, he went out and scored 35. We should have had him at 8K. Like, he was so obvious. Like, he feels like that guy. Like, it's like after the slate, we're like, holy shit. How do we not play Christian McCaffrey at $8,000? When's the last time he was sub 8K, or 8K, sub 9,000 for that matter? I mean, I felt like last year he was pretty much 9 to 10,000 the entire season, and he was scoring, 29 or 25 to 30 almost every single week. He was one of the most consistent running backs the entire year. I think he only had 1 game, 2 games all of last year even including the playoffs, where he scored less than 20 DK points. Twice it happened last year. So, like, if you're talking about consistency, like, everything's there. Like, it's just tough. Like, with not wanting to play him at that price. But I get it. There is the possibility that he doesn't, that they limit him and he doesn't see that type of workload. But I think those are the 3 guys at the top that I have the most interest in. And then, like I said, I could definitely mix in some of these other running backs.
Yeah, McCaffrey's a solid tournament play. I feel like if you're willing to take a chance on that, if you have a high risk tolerance to be able to take that on the chin, because like Kev says, like, it's just not. We don't normally get that situation. And if he is a full go, and obviously they've been talking positively about him, again, it is Kyle Shanahan. You take everything he says with a grain of salt. But if he's out there, he could pay off dividends. The thing that's interesting about Kamara, boys, before we move on to wide receiver, is that, yeah, Kev, you're right about Atlanta. Like, they've been absolutely incredible against running backs, especially their rushing defense. Like, they've only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns on the season, which tied for second fewest. But the targets and receptions that they're allowing to running backs, they're allowing 63 targets and 54 receptions, which puts them at number 4 and 5 respectively amongst those categories. And so when you're looking at the workload that Alvin Kamara is getting on the other side, it could be a long day for these guys, especially with no Chris Olave out there. That's what makes it that much more enticing. And if he happens to find the end zone, he's just going to pay off dividends. Let's talk about wide receiver, boys, as we move along. And guys, rocking along with us, the DJ Nation podcast, powered by the Fantasy Authority. We're talking the Week 10 main slate on DraftKings, and as we get to wide receiver, again, like, I mean, you got your usual suspects at the top that we would be, normally excited to play on any site, but to me, it's just I just like the running backs much more at their price tags. That's Justin Jefferson on the road against Jacksonville, CeeDee Lamb at home against Philly, but no Dak Prescott, and Justin Jefferson might not see the work to be able to pay off his price tag. And then you get AJ Brown, who I think is interesting if you're not playing Saquon. Like, for me, it'd be one of the two. Like, I want Saquon or I want AJ Brown, and AJ Brown just shown the propensity of the upside to be able to get there, unlimited work. And if Saquon for whatever reason is not being able to get it done, like, we could see an AJ Brown like massive game against this Dallas defense that they can't stop the run, they can't stop the pass, can't really stop anything. And he's definitely had explosive matchups before. So, AJ Brown's definitely an exciting piece to be able to get to, especially if you're not playing Saquon. Another guy that's interesting to me, where I'm not going to necessarily be looking to play him with his pass catcher, is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's target totals have been, incredible. Even with Devontae Adams coming into the mix, then you take out, Lazard's been gone or dealing with injury, and then Mike Williams is now going to be gone, and like the concentrated target nature of this offense to these two guys, like Garrett Wilson is still intriguing to me at 7,200. He's priced up a couple $100 more than what his price tag has been. But definitely, a way to get exposure to that game for me is going to be through Garrett Wilson, who, he's been the deep guy threat for them as well. And can, definitely pay off dividends at that price tag. Deebo Samuel, would love him to be in because I want to play Purdy. He's 6,900. Fire him up. Good way to get to, that offense that's expected to score 30. The mid-tier, I guess people will be looking to build here. There's not a lot that stands out to me in the mid-tier this week. Ladd McConkey, I expect to be, one of the most popular wide receivers this week. And to me, it's like, I'm just going to play Quentin Johnson. Like, Quentin Johnson's one of my favorite receivers on the week. He's 4,900. And he, all he does is score touchdowns. And he's also the deep ball threat guy. Whereas, McConkey's getting most of his work underneath and kind of needs the volume to be able to get there. But are they going to need, Herbert passing all that much with Will Levis on the other side and the way this Tennessee defense is shaped up? Like, I don't know, but like if Ladd McConkey is going to be as popular as he's projected, I'm just going to go down and play a more, explosive guy who just does everything, but, does everything, including catch touchdowns for this team at the $4,900 price tag. Jordan Addison is interesting to me a little bit, even with a healthy receiving core there. He's only 5,300 against this Jacksonville team. And, kind of like what we saw from him on the Island game there, still being into the mix, even with TJ Hawkinson back. I think he's real interesting. Amari Cooper, again, he could be out this week. He got a Q tag. He's only 5,800, which makes an interesting pairing with Josh Allen. If I'm looking to pay for him, if he's out, then Khalil Shakir is 6,000. And, I think that's definitely an easy pairing with Josh Allen there to get to. We're definitely we talked a lot about the guys who we want to pay up for at running back. So we're definitely going to need, value on the slate. You're definitely, value is going to stand out with the Tampa Bay guys going against San Fran and who to pair there. I think we're not going to have McMillan again for Tampa Bay this week. So we're going to be looking at, the likes of Sterling Shepard and Trey Palmer, Ryan Miller, even Raheem Jarrett, at 3,600, who, was getting into the mix on the Island game. That's going to be fun. I never play this guy, but, if Chargers are going to be popular on the other side, you got Westbrook-Ikhine, who I think has scored a touchdown in like four straight games. I just got to call him out because if you're looking for value, like, people could be going to this guy and he's been, somewhat doing it, but I never play him. Just interesting. Parker Washington, I think, will be interesting for Jacksonville as well, too. I'm not sure who Mike Jones's favorite target's going to be, but I know definitely going to be some interesting guys to play here down in this range. Raymond McLeod is interesting as well, too. If Drake London can't go, sounds like he'll be able to, but that would have been an interesting one if not. Maddie, what's reaching out to you? I see a comment up here from Brendan Bowen before I toss it to you. He's asking about Mixon and what we think of him, and I like Mixon. He's just not on the main slate this week, so maybe we're playing him. Go ahead, Kev.
I guess, I mean, if you're, because I'm assuming this is another FanDuel question, which we got into last week, but like, it's not a terrible matchup. The Lions, early in the season were really good against running backs, but as of recently, in the last 6 games, they've actually allowed 5.5 yards per carry, which is the highest rate in the league. They've also their stuff rate is really low as well. They've allowed one of the highest missed tackles forced per attempts, the yards per contact. So they have really started to struggle against the run since Aiden Hutchinson has been out. The only thing that worries me is that the Lions just curb stomp them, and then they're not able to run the ball, and you don't really need to run the ball. Like, that's my biggest concern with that game. And we don't really talk about showdown, but like, that's gonna be my concern with that game is without Nico Collins. who I don't think is going to play, because I think they would have activated him sooner if they were going to, or had him return to practice sooner than Friday. I don't think he plays. If he does, then that changes everything, because he is the key to that offense. Like, before he got hurt, that offense was vastly different. They were averaging, like CJ Stroud, for example, was averaging almost 18 DK points a game. Since Nico Collins has been out, he's been averaging 12 DK points per game. Like, their offense has been abysmal. Their offensive line is extremely banged up. So that's the only thing that worries me about Joe Mixon. Obviously he's been really good, but you're playing the Lions now. This isn't, them playing the Patriots or, the Titans or something like that. Like, the Lions have absolutely pretty much taken the soul of everybody they played this year, and they will smash you if you allow them to. Like, they will not let up. And so that's what worries me about Joe Mixon. Like, I think he could get there, but if you're talking about on FanDuel where you have the entire slate of all the other running backs, I think it would be super thin.
I'd agree.
Yeah, great call out there. And FanDuel, they got the late game slate that is into their main slate. We talk mostly DraftKings, which is only the noon and 3 p.m. games. But yeah, if you guys have questions about the FanDuel slate, definitely get them in, and we'll make sure we hit on those. Appreciate you guys rocking along with us. Maddie, what's coming out to you at the wide receiver position, and where your build's taking you?
I don't really like a lot of the wide receivers this week. I mean, my lean this week is to pay up at running back, and I'm actually, this is one of the first times I think we've kind of disagreed, Ryan, is I actually like the mid-range receivers, even though you hate them. So maybe I can talk you into some of these guys, but I think the highest priced guy that I'm looking at this week would be $7,200 Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is one of the best receivers in the NFL in terms of fantasy points with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, his targets, he gets 10 targets a game pretty much, even with Devontae Adams in there. I mean, that offense, they just traded away Mike Williams. That offense is literally Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, and Breece Hall. Rodgers does not throw the ball to anybody else other than Allen Lazard. So it's a 3 or 4 man show. And so, if that game gets into a back and forth, Garrett Wilson will be a big part of that. So I like him as the one pay up. But outside of him, I kind of like the mid like 5 to 6K range. So you got DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, is one. He's 5,300, which is kind of crazy. I don't know why he's that cheap, but he's essentially stepped into the lead dog role. We saw that last week in their game against the Raiders. Hopkins has stepped into the wide receiver one there for the Chiefs. Prior to Hopkins getting there, that role was wide open. Juju's been banged up. He played that role for a minute until he got hurt. But I just don't think Xavier Worthy is going to end up being that, high volume wide receiver one for them. He's just more going to be more of a, couple targets downfield. Let's get him some, screen passes behind the line of scrimmage and let him try to run with the ball in his hands. So I really think the ceiling for that pass offense is still going to run through Kelsey and Hopkins, and 5.3 for, Hopkins. I guess it's matchup based as to why they priced it there. But to Kev's point, I mean, the Broncos haven't played a ton of offenses. And so at 5.3, the risk of, him not hitting a ceiling is baked into that price. So I'm pretty confident he gets you into that 12 to 15 range, but he's obviously got the upside for more. So I really like DeAndre Hopkins at 5.3. I think that price is just too cheap. And if you're playing Josh Allen, there's 2 Colts receivers that I like a ton. One's the mid-range, Josh Downs. There is no Michael Pittman this week. Josh Downs has been Flacco's favorite target to throw to. And we know that Indy is going to need to throw the ball to keep up with Buffalo in this one. So Downs at 6,200, he's going to be their wide receiver one. I like him a lot, especially if you're playing, like I said, Allen on the other side, which I have heavy interest in. And then AD Mitchell, 3,400. He's probably my favorite value of the whole slate. I think he projects pretty close to, I think you can project him pretty close to 10 points this week. I would expect him to see 6 to 8 targets. And usually you don't find that at his price tag of 3,400. So he's one of my favorite values. And I'm slowly, I guess, starting to talk myself more and more into a Bills Colts stack, but that's here nor there. On the Buffalo side, we're going to need to see what the news is. It sounds like Coleman's going to miss, and then we need to keep track of Amari Cooper, whether he plays or not, because that offense all of a sudden gets really consolidated if those guys were to be out. I mean, Shakir would become very close to must play. And we'll talk about tight ends as well, but Kincaid with Josh Allen will be a phenomenal stack if those guys are out. So that's just a fun game, I think. Indy at home, I think can lend to more scoring for Indy than if they were in Buffalo. I guess that tends to lead it to being more of projecting more for a shootout than a one-sided affair. The other big injury news we need to keep an eye on is Debo. If he were to miss, I think Jawan Jennings becomes a great play at 5,100, another mid-range guy. So I think there's a lot of mid-range guys that are absolutely in play this week. And Mooney's another one. Mooney's almost a must play if London were to miss, because the Saints just traded away Lattimore. Don't forget that. So their pass defense is not going to be what it typically is. But yeah, I like the Bucs guys. They're okay. I just think you're not going to know who it's going to be. I think last week it was a combination of different guys. And really Cade Otton is essentially their wide receiver one currently, even though he's a tight end. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for me from the mid range. So it's Garrett Wilson up top, Downs, Hopkins, Mooney, Jawan Jennings in that mid range, and Shakir as well if the other guys are out, and then AD Mitchell for me is my favorite value.
Yeah, I like the AD Mitchell call a lot. The Bills have actually been pretty stingy against wide receivers. I think they're only allowing the sixth least fantasy points to wide receivers this year. But AD Mitchell's the cheaper one of the two. He's definitely explosive. Made that great sideline catch last week. I could see him getting more involved, and their receiver coach has said as such that they wanted to get him involved, and he's cheaper than Josh Down. Like the thing about the mid-range, Maddie, is like for me to be able to play these guys at running back that I want to play, I need to find cheaper options elsewhere, which is why I'm not falling on the mid-range with wide receiver, but trying to get to guys in that same vein. Like, okay, can't afford Josh Downs. Okay, AD Mitchell, I can afford him. Like, let's go. And I think he definitely has the same outlook. So definitely like where your head's at though. And we always try and come to similar conclusion by week's end. So it'll be a fun slate. Kev, what say you? I see the chat is on and popping. So come in here and give your hot wide receiver takes for the people.
Yeah, so I think when you look at this week, right, I definitely think the mid range is definitely in play. But I have to ask you guys a question. Of the 49ers wide receivers, which one would you want to play?
If Debo's in, it's Debo.
Yeah, I think for me it's Debo too, but I'm interested in Jawan Jennings, to be honest, at 5,100.
Yeah, he's definitely in play. Mm-hmm. Especially if Debo's out, but he's in play regardless.
I think Debo plays, but I actually think Ricky Pearsall is also a pretty solid value. So I know this most of what he's done has been without Jawan Jennings, who hasn't played, but I think they just try to get him the ball a lot of different ways. Super explosive, and at the cost of $4,400, I don't mind getting there. At first, when I was first looking at Deebo Samuel and looking at the slate, like he makes a lot of sense, but he also just hasn't quite really shown any sort of ceiling this year. I know he can always get there. I know he's had some bad luck. I think the Jets, what was that a couple weeks ago against Dallas? They had like a 70-yard touchdown that was called back. So that was rough. But if I'm paying up for wide receiver, I don't know if you necessarily need to get there with Deebo, but I definitely think like there's lots of like with Justin Jefferson. We've talked about that. AJ Brown, worries the hell out of me, especially with the game environment as well. That are they even able to get there? And then I think after that, but like I said, George Pickens, phenomenal play. He's been absolutely on point. He actually should have had an even better game with the last time they played, where he had 2 touchdowns. One that he wasn't able to get. He had 2 feet down. It's not both of the feet down. And then I think there was one called back on penalty. But $6,800. They're not going to have Marshawn Lattimore in that game. But George Pickens, love that play as well. Josh Downs, we know if you're going to attack the Bills, it's from the slot. 6,200. You guys have already talked about that game. AD Mitchell, I definitely think is in play at 34. I mean, that's just way too cheap. But he also really hasn't shown anything this year. And I think Alec Pierce is just kind of similar. But what worries me is that the Bills pretty much sell out to stop anything deep. So like they do not really allow any deep balls. That's why Tyreek Hill absolutely has sold against them, because they just take away anything deep. They will not allow. They do whatever they can to sell out to stop it. And so that's where it makes me nervous to play either one of those guys, because that's kind of the Alec Pierce and AD Mitchell. That's kind of the way they've been utilized. Is they're much more of the deep downfield target, and that's kind of what they look to take away. And Josh Downs obviously plays the most from the slot. He's a 80% plus from the slot type of guy. And Josh Downs has also just been incredible. Like last week was kind of his first down game. That I guess you'd consider a down game. He still scored double-digit points, but it wasn't, as good as what it had previously been. But still, $6,200. I think he's in play. I have no clue whatsoever why Xavier Worthy is more expensive than DeAndre Hopkins. Like Xavier Worthy hasn't done shit all year.
That makes no sense.
He has done absolutely nothing outside of he had a couple games where he scored a couple touchdowns, but that was been about it. But he's been super inconsistent. And now, we kind of saw it last week. Exactly what we talked about with DeAndre Hopkins was the way they were going to utilize him was in the Rashee Rice role. And the good news here with him is last week he played almost 50% of the snap from the slot, and Patrick Surtain does not travel into the slot. He pretty much stays on the outside. And so I just think that's really good news for DeAndre Hopkins, who's still only $5,300. So I don't know how you can get away from him at his price. That's still way too cheap. I know they played on Monday night, so he didn't get his price adjusted like he normally would have, because he should probably be closer to $7K with, I think, the role that he's going to see. Jordan Addison is also in play, $5,300. And then, past, like you said, there's not a lot of just value that is just standing out. I think, a Ray McLeod would be in play if Drake London were to miss. And then, I don't know, Parker Washington, maybe. Calvin Austin could always get there if you're wanting to play a stack, especially of the Steelers. I think you could look there. But that feels kind of thin. I know last week he had the touchdown, but that's not something you'd expect. But that's kind of what it. But nothing down here in the 4K and below really stands out.
Yeah, no, it's nothing will stand out necessarily, but I'm going to try and take shots on some of these guys who, still have decent profiles. I can see a way where they can, get to 20 points and, be able to build elsewhere around them. Two of the mid-range guys I want to talk. Well, first of all, Kev, to answer your question, there isn't a favored receiver necessarily that I want to pair with Purdy, because I want to play the tight end with Purdy and can't wait to talk about that. But in the mid-range too, we didn't talk about Caleb, but this team does put up points when they're at home. They're going against the New England Patriots, and you get DJ Moore at 6,300 and Roma Dunze at, I believe, 5,200. Either one of those guys I could see putting up a big score here. Keenan Allen just, he hasn't looked like the Keenan Allen that we're accustomed to, and him and Caleb haven't been on the same page. The wide receiver who he's been on the page with the most is Rome. Maddie, I know you've asked about him, a couple times, and I think you were close to playing him last week, and he would have paid, he would have put up dividends because he had 8 and 100 or whatever it was. So he's definitely been hitting a stride, but also like DJ Moore, it could be a squeaky wheel narrative. It's just shaping up that way so much for him. We know what is in his range of outcomes. He has 30-point burgers, in his ability, and especially against this New England defense, that doesn't worry me at all at home. We also have coaches who are fighting for their jobs, so I expect them to, keep being aggressive for whatever that's worth in front of the home crowd, if they're, able to get things going and put up points here. So I guess the Bears receivers do kind of interest me in the mid-range just for that standpoint, and I feel like they'll definitely go, under-owned and underutilized, but we know what their ceiling is. Fun week stuff to be able to discuss at the wide receiver position. I don't think we've much gone deep into wide receiver like that before, so that's great. Just real quick, Ladd McConkey expected to be the most owned wide receiver. Are you guys playing him outside of Herbert's next?
No. I'm good on that.
Beautiful.
I mean, he's got one game. He's scored one game over 15 points. 2 games over 15 points. He's got a 17 and a 32. Everything else is 15 or less. It's like for the highest owned wide receiver on the slate. No, I'm good.
No, yeah. And I don't expect the volume to be there, but Herbert's going to be popular, so I think it's interesting. Let's talk about wide receivers before we get into defense, boys, and or wide receivers. Let's talk about tight ends. Tight ends a fun one. It's interesting this week. You got Travis Kelce at the top at 6K. You got George Kittle in an amazing matchup here at 5,800. Can't believe he's 5,800. I think he's 8,000 on FanDuel, which makes his price even more head scratching this week. And especially if Debo is limited or out, he's just absolutely an incredible play. Shout out to Cade Otton, who now all of a sudden is priced up at 5,500, but he is the wide receiver 1 for this team until further notice. So that even that price tag feels absolutely right for him, and wouldn't blame people getting there. You got Evan Ingram right behind, who could be dealing with the banged up wide receiver corps on his own. We know that backup quarterbacks or rookie quarterbacks, or however you want to put it, Mac Jones could definitely be looking to find the tight end in a matchup like this against Minnesota. So Evan Ingram is definitely interesting for me. Honestly, boys, like for me, and I'll toss it to you, Maddie, like I'm playing George Kittle. Like I said, I'm having one team that has Purdy and definitely will have George Kittle on it. I kind of even want to play George Kittle out on an island. And then I'm interested in Taysom Hill yet again. He's 4K. Like I don't know how you can play a team that doesn't have Kamara or Taysom Hill on it this week, because of the roles that these guys have within the offense of the Saints. Like, if Kamara's not getting there, then I don't see a world where Taysom Hill is at least not getting one score in the way that he's utilized as a Swiss Army knife on this team. He definitely could, pay dividends more across that board. So definitely like those two guys the most. We'll have interest in Dalton Kincaid if the wide receivers are banged up for Buffalo. But that's probably, kind of where it starts and ends with me, unless I'm, playing a quarterback and I can talk myself into the receiver on the other end. Maddie, what say you at the tight end position?
I'm with you 100%. It's Kittle if I'm paying up at 5,800. Mid-range is Kincaid. We talked about the potential for Buffalo injuries, and Kincaid saw 10 targets last week, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7 the weeks prior to that. So, he's right in that 6 to 7 target range pretty much every week, but does, with some injuries, saw 10 last week. So at 4,900, they're playing Indy. We like Josh Allen. Kincaid stacking with Allen makes a ton of sense in that mid-range tight end. And then, I agree with you on Taysom Hill as well. He would be my cheaperish tight end at 4K. Scored 16 points last week. We had a touchdown. So if you take the touchdown away, he still gets you 10, which is okay at 4K. But to your point, Ryan, him and Kamara are going to be so heavily involved in that offense with no Olave and no Shaheed. Whether it's Taysom Hill running the ball, whether it's Taysom Hill throwing the ball, whether it's Taysom Hill catching the ball, he's going to be involved, and I would expect him to touch the ball somewhere in the 12 to 15 time range. So I do like Taysom. 4K is pretty cheap for a guy that plays three positions between quarterback, running back, and tight end. So I'm interested. But I would say if I'm playing Josh Allen, Kincaid's probably my favorite tight end on the slate.
Yeah, love that. Kev, let's say you at tight end.
Yeah, I don't have any. I mean, that's exactly who I would look to play. I think it's Kittle. I think it's Kincaid, and then I think it's Taysom Hill. I think those are the three that make the most sense. I think any other tight end would probably just be involved in a stack.
Yeah, no, I like it. Yeah, I think the other, just real quickly before we move on to defense, I guess Will Dissly will be catching steam. I think he's popular again. It just goes into the people playing Herbert, wanting to play Herbert doubles.
Right.
He's 3,100, so that's an interesting one to call out. Again, the Titans defense is banged up, so I think it does warrant talking about, I guess, but it just still kind of I just can't trust their passing output volume thus far to be able to get there. But makes sense in stacks to me. And then Hunter Henry, I think, has some merit, as a one-off. Maybe you play a mini with a Bears wide receiver and Hunter Henry at tight end. He's 3,900. He's definitely been involved in this offense with Drake May as of late, seeing as much as 9 targets in the past week. So that's interesting. The Bears secondary is banged up a little bit as well too, and they've been got by tight ends in the past. So I definitely think there's merit to potentially be targeting Hunter Henry as well in many correlated stacks, or even as a one-off. I guess if you're playing Kamara, you can take Hunter Henry, because I still am not sure I like to play Kamara and Taysom together, but there's so many injuries on the Saints side that might be plus EV there. Let's talk about defense, boys, before we wrap up and build a team for the people in the Millie Maker. Shout out to everybody rocking along with us. This is the Gen Nation podcast powered by the Fantasy Authority. We're talking the NFL DFS Week 10 main slate here on DraftKings. As we look at defense, again, pretty straightforward to me. Love what they did at pricing this week on DraftKings. All of the defense that you really would want to target are at the top. Bears come in at 3K. They'll be popular. I expect them to be probably the most popular defense this week at home against New England. So that always makes you feel wary paying for the most popular defense, but they're 3K and I need value. So gotta look there to start. I do think there's some merit to taking New England defense at 2,500, which is $100 more than the minimum this week. If they, just the way that the offensive line has played for the Bears, if they can somehow get pressure, for some turnovers there, they could definitely pay off dividends. But, if I'm able to, definitely like the Eagles, definitely like the Vikings, definitely like the Chargers. Just don't know if I'll get there. And that's paying all the way up for defense this week. So it's definitely a weird one, which means that they did well with the pricing and like where things come in at so far. So placeholder for me is the Bears, even with them being popular. I think I'll be contrarian elsewhere to be able to make that work. Maddie, what say you?
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because we don't like a lot of these games from a stacking perspective, and we like a lot of the running backs, but we also don't like a ton of the defenses. So it's just kind of an interesting conundrum, right? Like you would think if we think it's a lower scoring slate that we should be all over a ton of these defenses, but I'm with you. Like the Bears are the only one that actually that stand out to me as like on paper really good play, price considered. There's not really that much difference between 3K and 2,500, which is what the other decent options are this week.
Yeah.
So it's I guess if you made me pick one of the min price defenses, I would choose Denver against Kansas City, but that's just probably because Denver's probably the best defense of the group down there, despite them not really playing any top tier offenses this year. But we have seen Mahomes turn the ball over. So I think it's the Bears. They're gonna be very popular though. So
yeah, they will be extreme chalk.
Yeah, I'm seeing 31% on my end.
That's right. Yeah, that's insane for defense, but
it's high.
It makes sense. And we've seen the payoff before this year. It's been a while, but yeah, early in the season, those chalk defenses were hitting in abundance. Kev, what are you doing at defense this week?
I think I definitely agree with the Patriots call. The Chicago's offensive line has just been an absolute sieve recently, and honestly, Caleb Williams has really struggled to do anything under pressure. He has not been great when pressured so far this year, and so though I will say the Patriots don't really get pressure though at that high of a rate either. So I don't know. We'll see how that plays out, but I think if you're paying up, Chargers are 100%. Eagles are obviously a really good play. The Bills are a good play. We saw Joe Flacco last week really struggle, and then the Patriots actually allowed the second most sacks in the league per dropback. So the Bears at 3K is also, I think, a place you could look at as well.
Rookie mistake on mute there. That's my bad. But yeah, I love it, boys. Love where we're headed at. It's going to be a fun week. It's a weird one. It's a strange one. Not the most enjoyable one that we've talked through. But that's, there's always edges. There's always edges to be able to find, and we're here to be able to help the people do that. And let's build this lineup out for the people. Build it in the Millie Maker as we always do. I started off last time, so Maddie, let's go to you and how we building this week.
Let's go Josh Allen. I'm only seeing 5% projected ownership for Josh Allen, which on this slate is kind of crazy.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's it. I'm going to end up with a lot of Josh Allen again 2 weeks in a row.
Don't hate it.
So, Shakir.
Makes sense to me. Let's just throw in AD Mitchell as the bring back. We talk about it all the time with Buffalo that you don't necessarily need to bring back when you're playing this team because they just have the propensity to score so many points and don't necessarily always have that happen. But AD Mitchell's so cheap without Pittman being there. Let's see what we can build with this lineup.
Let's try to fit Saquon in. We'll see what happens.
But Barkley in at 8,300 still gives us 49.20 per position left that's open. And Kev, while you're thinking about that, we'll talk about Julia Temperstein, I believe is her name, in the chat. Shout out to Julia, who's been rocking along with us. She is asking thoughts on Cooper Rush. He can really sling it. Maddie, you're kind of our resident Dallas Cowboys guy there. So how you feeling about Cooper Rush's outlook this week against Philly?
I don't want to be the resident Cowboy fan. They've been not very good this year. I mean, Rush is fine. I just think he's fine from a traditional, football standpoint. He's not going to make a lot of high risk throws that Dak makes. He's going to take care of the ball. And I just think from a fantasy perspective, he's got a lower outlook than what Dak typically has. And we've seen Dak struggle a bit this year. I guess I don't know that offense is going to be better with Rush, and I wouldn't necessarily play Dak in this spot against Philly myself. I think if you like that game, you play Saquon and Hurts on the one side, and you run it back with Lamb on the other side. Is how I would play it. I would mini stack it as opposed to going quarterback there.
Yeah, that's an interesting play there with Lamb. Because we know what he's been doing, and he literally is the focal point of that offense.
He's their whole offense. Yeah,
I was just looking through Cooper Rush's game logs here, and the upside hasn't necessarily been there. He actually has a matchup against Philly on the resume in 2022, a touchdown and 3 interceptions. That was on the road in Philly, hostile environment, but a couple 200-yard passing games there, but just not a lot of multi-score touchdown games, which is definitely the outlook that you would want, especially going against this team. But he's going to be out there. The thing is, if he's not playing well, do they look to go to Lance? I'm curious to see what their quarterback active situation looks like on Sunday.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, who knows what the how quick the trigger is on benching Rush for Lance if things aren't going well.
Yeah.
I mean, they traded a 4th round pick or something, whatever it was for Lance. Yeah. If you're going to do that and then not play the guy, Dallas just loves burning 4th round picks, apparently.
4th round pick for Mingo.
I mean, they just traded one for Mingo. So,
that's great.
But yeah, I think Dallas offense is just broken right now. And even when they were top notch 2 years ago, right, when they had Amari Cooper and all that, Rush stepped in and he only scored 13 points, 12 points, 17 points, 4 points, 8 points, across that stretch he was starting. So
yeah,
to your point, Ryan, I don't think that there's a ceiling there. Again, I think he's fine. He had a solid win-loss record. A big part of that was because the defense was good. But I think he's fine as a real-life backup quarterback. I think from a fantasy perspective, if you think he's going to put up points this week, I think I would just play Lamb because that's who it's going to go through.
Yeah. tough first matchup for him to be, playing on the year against this team. It is at home, so I think he takes solace in that as opposed to the environment in Philly and what that could bring. But yeah, the odds stacked against him. But yeah, if you're in a pinch, if it's for redraft or anything like that, more interesting play there. But yeah, for daily, I don't think you need to necessarily go that route. Just to recap everybody, and shout out to Julia for her question there. Definitely want to make sure we answer that before we sign off. We're building this Millie Maker lineup for the pod here, and so far we got Josh Allen with Khalil Shakir, AD Mitchell bring back, Saquon Barkley at one of the running back positions, still have running back, wide receiver, tight end, flex, and defense available. And Kev, it's on you. So where are we going with this?
DeAndre Swift.
DeAndre Swift. All right. So we'll get both of our running backs in there. And let's go. I mean, it's going to be tough to get to Kamara, so let's just go with my rule here and put in Taysom Hill at tight end. 4,700 left per wide receiver, flex, and defense.
All right. Let's go. I mean, we've gone kind of off the board here a little bit because Josh Allen and Barkley are both projected under 10% ownership, so we can get a little chalky. So let's go with DeAndre Hopkins.
Hopkins at
Man,
50.
Allen and Barkley are both under 10%.
It's crazy, man.
Oh, man.
I'm going to go Bears D correlation. Lays $5,800 at the flex.
All right. You know what? We don't have a 49er yet, which
you could run 2 tight ends and go Kittle.
Crazy. Yeah. So we got to go Kittle.
I'm cool with that. Especially if Debo misses, Kittle can smash Tampa.
Yeah. And love that.
He can smash him even if Debo plays.
Love that. Got exposure to Philly, Buffalo, and San Fran on this Millie team.
Yep. I do like that.
Use all the salary too, boys. So we'll see what that runs like. But yeah, recap the build. It's Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift, Khalil Shakir, AD Mitchell, DeAndre Hopkins, Taysom Hill, George Kittle, Bears D. And we're locking that in to the Millie lineup. And as we lock that in, that is going to be a wrap for the Week 10 podcast, breaking down the DFS main slate for Week 10. Crazy boys that we're already at Week 10, but we are here a couple more weeks and we'll get, one of our favorite slates to talk about. That's the Thanksgiving slate. Can't wait to talk about that with you guys, and we'll still have the main slate for the people as well too that week. So it should be a fun week of content for the Fantasy Authority, for DJ Nation. But yeah, any last words for the people, boys, before we sign off?
Yeah, hold your nose while you watch this slate of games this weekend. They won't be as exciting as Thursday night's game.
Yeah, just play the showdown slate.
Yeah, maybe go light, go showdown, go into prime time. We got 2 fun prime time games that are on the docket. Or if you're playing FanDuel, you'll get to at least play that Sunday night game on the main slate, which definitely should have some fantasy goodness to it. So good luck to everybody with your lineups this week. Signing off for the boys, myself, Ryan Williams. You can find me on Twitter and X at Ryan_Alexander_W. Maddie DFS, Maddie 2v2, Maddie Gets Buckets at Maddie DFS is where you can find him on X and Twitter. And the Godfather himself, Mr. Kevin Steele at Fantasy Rad 13 is where you can find him on Twitter and X. We'll catch you guys next time for the Week 11 main slate. Until then, get that money, get up in the top of the leaderboards, and we'll see you next time. Peace.